All right, welcome to the Nooner on a confusing Monday. Dave LaMont with you. Thank you for joining me. It's noon Eastern time, morning everywhere else in the U.S. And you wake up and things change all the time. There's the whole thing with the Pac-12 going on. There's a possibility you're going to see the top 5 conferences, including the Pac-12, split from the NCAA this fall, and possibly for good, depending on what the NCAA does with fall sports. If they vote to cancel them for this year, the Big 5 schools may go, we're going to go our own way. We've been thinking about this for a while. Let's go ahead and do that now. And so you may have championships in these sports that wouldn't be recognized by the NCAA. And again, a quick reminder, the NCAA does not control college football. That is the conferences. That is the networks. There's a lot of other folks who have say in there. The NCAA does not. The NCAA does everything else. They do the College World Series. They do the NCAA, the men's and women's basketball tournaments, all that stuff. Swimming, diving, golf, tennis, lacrosse, all of that and more. That's NCAA, not football. I actually don't know why, and it doesn't really matter either. So the Pac-12 players have come out and have come up with this hashtag We United. And there's some of them, and we really don't know how many, who are talking about forming as just sort of I can't really call it a union, but a loose bond of players with a long list of demands, and I don't have all of them. One of them, and the number one seems to be we want to be able to opt out without any penalty. And I believe the Pac-12 has gone along with that, or had said all along, look, if you opt out for health reasons because of the pandemic, you're fine with us. We're good. But there's a lot of other demands in here, including getting involved in social justice issues, racial justice issues, which is very important to a lot of people, but it's going to make other people angry. And then you have the whole thing with Washington State coach Nick Rolovich, who's been captured on a phone call. One of his wide receivers who calls him and says, hey, coach, I'm going to opt out. I have a history of sickle cell. I'm not sure it's safe for me. And, oh, by the way, I think I'm going to be involved with this student group as well. Well, and Rolovich is, according to this call, Rolovich is perfectly fine with this player dropping out for health reasons, maybe not quite so overjoyed at this player dropping out for social reasons. And now, there are disputes as to whether this conversation, but look at it this way, this conversation clearly happened because somehow it was recorded, and there's a transcript out there. You can read that for yourself. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. But that's pretty strong implication. So far, Washington State has said nothing. I would not want to be their sports information people today at 9 a.m. out there in Cougar Land. It's going to be awkward. They're going to have, now, as usual, if you check your socials, there's the crowd who always says, hey, shut up and take your scholarship. Don't you be grateful for that? Why aren't you grateful for that? I wish I had that. And then there's the others who say that scholarship doesn't cover everything, which, by the way, it doesn't. And I can tell you, as the father of scholarship athletes, I just sent money to one of them a few days ago. Okay, so it doesn't cover everything. It covers a lot, and I'll never turn it down. And if you're a parent of a potential scholarship athlete, take the deal. But it doesn't cover everything. I can promise you that. It covers a lot. So there's always that. So that argument has been dredged up again. And that is one, and I know this sounds awful because I'm supposed to have a hot take, but I see both sides of that, and we kind of live it in our house. We are eternally grateful that our boys got scholarships. We know they put a lot of time into their athletics, and two still are. Practice, workouts, film, travel. It's a lot of hours that go into being an athlete in addition to what is expected of you and what is necessary to survive in the classroom. So it's just not as simple as that. You're well treated? Yes, you get perks. Of course you do. But don't think these guys are walking around with money falling out of their pockets, because while they do get a stipend that is supposed to cover things, again, I can remember grocery store trips in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where, hey, Dad, I just need a couple things. And $170 later, it's more than a couple things. So It's a great deal, but it doesn't cover every single dollar and cent. But I'd take it in a heartbeat if I had been good enough, believe me. So we have that whole uncomfortable conversation going all over again. And a lot of it revolves around reluctance to change because we're so used to things being a certain way in a certain neat pile, and particularly with sports. A lot of people are so uncomfortable with social sports issues being tied together. The opening of the NBA the other night with virtually, and over the weekend, virtually every player and coach kneeling for the national anthem. Not all of them. Myers Leonard of the Heat cited a law enforcement background. Greg Popovich, the coach of the Spurs, who has taken a ton of social digs at people, is a U.S. Air Force veteran and chose to stand. He has that right to do that. Jonathan Isaac of the Magic cited religion as his reason not to wear a Black Lives Matter t-shirt and not to kneel. If you have if you have a reason, that's fine. It's not required. But the majority right now is deciding to send that message in the NBA. Hell, the games that I watched, even the referees were taking knees. Probably the only time you'll see players and refs on the same page. So this makes people uncomfortable. There are some people who will never accept kneeling, and you have that right. If you think some people think it's just perpetually disrespectful to troops, law enforcement, etc. Others are trying to say, hey, those same troops fought, were wounded, died, sacrificed for the right to peacefully protest. And not just to stand, but if they choose to peacefully protest, and I underline peaceful protests because that's what they are, but it makes us uncomfortable. Go back to college basketball. When we used to have, when I was a kid and for a while, you played at college, you stayed there, you didn't transfer, you played for 4 years, no matter who you were. You could be a superstar, the greatest college basketball player of all time, Lou Alcindor, now Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he played at UCLA in the varsity for 3 years. Back then, they had freshman teams when freshmen weren't even eligible for varsity. Now we have guys who don't even bother going to college and go to the G League or play overseas because they can make immediate money. Now, the G League isn't paying you a lot, but overseas you could probably draw a nice paycheck. And you skip the charade of one and done. Others do just the 1 year. They feel like that's a good environment for them. Maybe they can win a title and help their draft status, or maybe the coaching staff isn't particularly adept at getting a guy ready for the NBA. But that was uncomfortable. It still is uncomfortable for me, and I really do believe that it's hurt college basketball. But these guys have that right. If I were an exceptional student, which I was not, but if I had been, and I had an opportunity to work in my field and leave school early, and it wasn't athletics, what's stopping me? Nothing. Would you be mad about that? No, you wouldn't. Why? Because you don't even know about it. It's the same thing, and that's what the courts have ruled. It's the same thing. Just so happens that a one-and-done athlete is going to be well-known, and it is going to affect your favorite university or your favorite conference or the sport in general. And it has affected it. There's absolutely no question about that. You load up a couple of one-and-dones, and you're Kentucky and you're Duke and whatever, and you can just rinse, lather, repeat, and you're great every year with these guys. It's hard to see the 4-year teams do well anymore. Be lovely. Would love to see that go back to that, but it's not going to happen. And by the way, this was going on in other sports. In baseball, it had been going on for years. Guys could opt out early as long as they put in enough time. If you opted out, how many of you remember the story of Alex Fernandez, former Marlins pitcher who was an unbelievable college pitcher, as you might have guessed, opted out after 1 year with Miami, went to junior college, and was available for the draft. Others would play 3 years of college and then opt out for the draft. Others, like Alex Rodriguez, who was that close to becoming a University of Miami baseball player, had he set foot in a 9 o'clock class back when he was about to be a college freshman, instead of signing with Seattle, would have had to play a year or two or maybe even 3 of college baseball. That's how the rules go. And it's all part of change. And change makes people uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable sometimes. It's understandable. If change were comfortable, we wouldn't be complaining about it all the time, would we? A few other items. First off, a real huge thank you to Kelly Craig for coming in Friday. I hope you had a chance to see that. If not, go to my YouTube channel. Please subscribe, just because it makes me feel good. And it's free, so I'm not asking you for anything. And take a look at that episode. We had some technical problems. Kelly called back on a better line, and we ended up talking an additional half hour. It's a longer episode than usual. And Kelly, of course, was, as always, gracious. And she mentioned she might have a couple of opportunities, and let's see what they are. She certainly deserves to be on television if she wants to be. And we'll see if that works out for her. The Lou Williams story got an interesting deal over the weekend, an interesting addition to what may or may not have happened. So now we have he said, she said. This is always cool. I remember Sweet Lou. I believe he's still in quarantine with the LA Clippers for after attending a funeral where he was let out of the NBA bubble. He went to a strip club to buy, or perhaps they gave them to him, chicken wings that have his name on them, the Lou Will lemon pepper wings. Apparently a well-known strip joint in Atlanta. Over the weekend, story, and he said nobody was around, no dancers. I didn't stop for any of that. Well, there's a dancer who's now calling him out on that and saying that ain't true. I danced for him, and oh, by the way, he tipped well. So you can take your choice as to whom you wish to believe, Sweet Lou or whatever this woman's name is. But she did remember that he was a generous tipper, so Lou, good on you for that. So you screwed up your team by being selfish, but at least you weren't selfish if you did tip well. Yoenis Cespedes was a weird story over the weekend. The Mets slugger, who hadn't played in a couple of years, had battled some serious injuries, gets up, and in his first at bat, rips a homer. And people were so happy. This was a big moment. This might be a good omen for a Mets team that certainly has had more than its share of difficulties, although they do have some very promising talent with Alonso and DeGrom and others, but they just can't get it together. Well, you might have heard about happening to Yoenis. He up and packed his bags and took off and didn't tell anybody. Now, we have had actual tragedies in the world and in Major League Baseball, and I'm blanking on the name of the pitcher. I think it was with Cardinals, who was found dead, unresponsive and dead in his hotel room of a heart issue, I believe it was. So imagine the fear that when the Mets officials finally can't find him on the bus, obviously he's not, they can't get a hold of him in the hotel. He doesn't come to the game. They don't know where he is. They have to get hotel security to not break down the door, but just open the door, and he's ghosted them. He didn't tell anybody that he was opting out because of the virus. They finally pieced it all together. And of course, social media being what it is, everybody handled this very calmly and didn't spread any untoward rumors at all about Yoenis Cespedes. Not one. No, not one. Probably about 100 before the truth, which is what we should be waiting for, came out. Now, the whole thing is clumsy. It is 1,000% awkward. Obviously, he should have told people. At least tell somebody on the team. If you don't have the necessary courage to just call your manager and say, hey, look, I'm not comfortable. I got to go. You can do that. No one will judge you if you opt out. We're seeing it in the NFL. We may see it in college football because there's SEC players and Pac-12 players who are threatening to do this, and probably some others. And they should not be punished. They should keep their scholarships because this is such a goofed up, and I censored myself there, time we're living in. But Cespedes just butchered this. And no, he wasn't hitting the ball great and all this other stuff. Maybe he's a little professionally frustrated, and he just says, to hell with it. So far, one player came back, Nick Markakis of the Braves, who was friends with Freddie Freeman, who got the virus before the season started. And Freeman told him about it. Hey, those 2-3 weeks really stunk. And Markakis took at that and said, well, that's not going to happen to me. Now he saw them play ball again, and he wants back in. As for the Marlins, better news seems to be coming as far as those who are potential players have all been clean so far, no positive tests. Did anyone ever think about interviewing or talking to, unless he was placed off limits, the poor bus driver who had to take, or bus drivers who had to take the Marlins players who were sick back to South Florida? Would you like to have had that job? What kind of protection did he or she or they have? I would assume the thickest, bulletproofest, plexiglassest thing you could ever imagine. And I think you had the same driver shoot through, right? You got to take a bathroom break. Or what do you do with the players who are supposed to be isolated and they're all in there together? This is your next 30 for 30, the bus ride. That's all I have to call it. But I want to know if the drivers, they have to, because that's a lawsuit, man. Are you kidding me? If any of those drivers get sick, you're really opening the door. What a mess. Marlins aren't scheduled to play until Friday. Commissioner Rob Manfred kind of ripped into the players, and he's not 100% wrong on this. If those stories really are true about Marlins players going out in Atlanta, then that is on them. There comes a point where you have to be a professional athlete. And I know you're young and you might have a few extra bucks than the average person, but you got to remember about everybody else, and you have to remember about your sport. So if that really did happen, and we're still kind of waiting for confirmation on that, then no, not good. Not good. And now the Marlins season, which wasn't expected to be a great one, but for God's sakes, the Orioles are 5-3 after a sweep over the weekend. Who knows? Who's to say the Marlins couldn't have a decent record right now? And now they're going to be in a position where they're basically using, if this were a strike, replacement players or scabs. Now, these guys are not scabs. All right, let's get that straight. That's a tough term to use. That's only for labor disputes. This is a dummy dispute, not a labor dispute. So you got that going for you, which is not nice. So it was a mess. Now, there is some good news in all of this. You got to watch a ton of hockey. I watched a bunch of games. There's already a controversy about whether or not a player was deliberately injured. And can we find out? Can we judge for ourselves? No, because we don't get access to the Blue Line feed. There's that controversy, but it was fun to watch some hockey. The NBA's had some real exciting, crazy games. Dallas Mavericks have scored over, I think, 140 in 2 games and haven't won either one of them, yet they've made the playoffs. The Heat got off to a solid start against a weakened Denver team, and the Heat are playing in about an hour against Toronto. That's a big-time game. And Jimmy Butler, who we don't really know a lot about why he wasn't around, is playing. Or is available. Let me rephrase that. Eric Spoelstra said today that Butler is available. They will need him, the Heat, if they're going to be a serious contender for the playoffs, to gain in the playoffs, to run in the playoffs, to make a move in the playoffs. They'll need him, obviously. So you had a lot of good. Golf was kind of interesting. It was interesting watching good players throw up all over themselves in the 18th of Southwind TPC in Memphis yesterday. Daniel Berger bogeyed the 18th. Brooks Koepka dunked it on the 18th. I mean, it looked like he was going to be the winner. So Justin Thomas wins, I believe that's his 13th title already. Man, he's won a lot. And now the PGA is here. The first actual major on the golf tour is going to happen, which seems impossible to believe. And it's kind of back in its usual August time slot anyway. They moved it to May, which I was never comfortable with. And now, because of the pandemic, at least one thing got put back in its place where it belongs, and that's the PGA. And I'm also happy not to hear it called Glory's Last Shot, which is just a god-awful term for that. That sounds like, some sort of Amazon Prime series, maybe a war movie or something, not golf. Okay, Glory's Last Shot. Come on, marketing people of the PGA of America. You've got to do better than that. Hopefully, future PGAs, and besides, now if you move the darn thing to May, you can junk that anyway. So we're okay. All right, fixing the English language. That's an easy one. because this term was on my mind over the weekend and I saw it written out, and I don't use this term. I'm not a big fan of it. And that is the new normal. Yes, it's new, but please tell me what's normal about it. What's normal about taking 5-6 steps from your car in a parking lot and going, whoops, forgot something, and having to walk back to get your mask, which you should do? What's normal about some of the videos you're watching about people who are anti-maskers screaming at people who are wearing masks? Not normal. Is it normal for people to wear Nazi symbol face masks in a Minnesota store? Well, not normal. Is it normal to have a 60-game baseball season? Not normal. Is it normal for college football to be pushing its season back, except the Sun Belt, which, according to Brett McMurphy over at Stadium, is planning on a 12-game season? I hope they pull it off. And by the way, some of those Sun Belt teams have lost games with the SEC, so I'm not sure how they're going to get 12 unless I don't know where they're going to get opponents, but they're going to try. That's not normal. It's not normal to have a hockey tournament in 2 cities. It's not normal to have the NBA meeting in 1 city, or Major League Soccer meeting in 1 city, or the NWSL in 1 city, or the WNBA in 1 city. It's nothing normal. It's new. And here's what's dumb about the phrase also. Eventually, we'll get back to just normal. We'll start to go to nightclubs and concerts again. We'll start to sit next to each other in arenas and games. We'll start going out to restaurants. We'll stop wearing masks. We should continue to wash our hands. We should continue to be safe whenever it's possible. But eventually, we'll fight our way through this. And we'll get back to what is normal. So, new normal, not a fan. Don't think it's one of my favorite expressions. It's fine grammatically. It is just not fine to hear. It just grates the ears. And listen, maybe I'm just too heavy a cynic, but when this first broke and we were seeing those horrible commercials that were all done by Zoom, where everybody is looking all blurry and you have 16 different little screens, we're all in this together. If only that were true, maybe we'd have some of the problems solved by now. But clearly, we are not all in this together. So there you have it. That'll do it for today's Nooner. I am desperately in search of a sponsor. By the way, go to Give a Nod if you'd like to have any one of a number of favorite sportscasters offer up a nod for a teeny-weeny fee to a friend, a family member, somebody as a birthday gift. NodOnDeck.com. Nod, N-O-D on deck, and we record a message for you. And it's very easy, and we're very eager to do it. I'm part of a great team of very talented sportscasters, so Nod on Deck is where you go for that. That'll do it for today. I'll be back with the Almost Daily Dave tomorrow, and thank you very much for tuning in for today's Nooner with Dave LaMont up on YouTube very shortly. That's all for Monday. I'll see you Friday with a long version. See you tomorrow with a shorty. Bye.